Okay, now our speaker for today is somebody who's been with us a long time and who we always appreciate. I do anyway. I feel certain you do too. And he's going to talk to us. He being Kevin Hauber is going to talk to us about simplicity of being. Okay, Kevin, take it away.
Let's do the unmute here. And and this is the moment that my dog chooses to chime in. So I'm getting my accompaniment too here, Rachel. I want your attention now. Okay, so I'm going to start off today with a piece from my other favorite Sufi poet, Rumi. This one may be familiar to you. It's called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from the beyond. Okay, so take that in for just a moment. Life has been interesting, and I'll use that word in its broadest context. Interesting since I was with you last. You know, when I am scheduled to do a lesson, I always wonder in advance what's going to show up for me as my lesson that I might be able to share with you. And like a lot of the Sundays that I prepare for, I didn't know what that looked like when this started, and so I approached this one not quite knowing what to do. And then the guests started to arrive, as Rumi describes. The challenge has been to meet the guests at the door laughing, and I'll spend a little bit of time sharing why, and then we'll get into some of the subject material. Kristen and I were inadvertently exposed to COVID a month ago today on March 18th, and we spent several weeks in quarantine. Other family members came down with it, so we went ahead and did the testing, a couple of rounds of it in my case to get an accurate result, and then we isolated to wait out the quarantine period. Both of us had negative COVID tests. And then the symptoms started to show up. So my first guest to greet was frustration and anger at being exposed to COVID, followed by frustration and anger at not being able to be productive and active in the normal way that I would be during this isolation, during this quarantine. And between Kristen and I'm the one most inclined to do the outside stuff, you know, the stuff out in the world consistently. So isolating was difficult for me. Crazy making would probably be a better description. I would not do well in solitary confinement. Just would not do well. And while the Zoom calls are great, I still need some regular non-electronic human connection and interaction. And that's a piece of self-knowledge that's been reinforced through me over the course of the last month. So we waited out our quarantine, and later tests confirmed that yes, in fact, we had COVID, and that no, we were no longer contagious. so that we could get back to life. So there's this, this whole starting up again. It was unpleasant and disruptive as an experience. And fortunately, that's all it was, because for so many, it's been more than that. And we're both doing really well right now. So in this isolation time that I had, I had to decide how I wanted to spend the time. So I started catching up on some podcasts on the Enneagram that I'd been wanting to download for quite a while. So, why not do some spiritual study while you can't do a lot of anything else? And these particular podcasts featured Russ Hudson, who's the co-founder of the Enneagram Institute. He's author of the book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram. Some of you may be familiar with that one. It's been around for quite a while, and it is, probably the foundation textbook for the Enneagram. Now, I studied that material for many years. I've attended workshops that Russ has put on several times, and I've always gotten a lot from his work and had great insights as a result. And I expected more of the same, even in the whole video format, and I was right. So the first thing that got my attention in the discussion was his statement that we all have negative feelings, but have no license to act out our undigested stuff on other people. Acting out in that way just tries to avoid feeling. Okay, so I'm going to say that again because that's one of our big takeaways for the day. so please, take this one in and internalize it. We all have negative feelings, but we have no license to act out our undigested stuff on other people. Acting out in that way just tries to avoid feeling. Now, I know a number of folks, including some extended family members, who really need to hear that. Part of me wonders if they can, but that is something that I am sure I'm not in the only one in the room, that has the experience of dealing with that kind of stuff. So that was one visitor to contemplate. Then it got a little more personal when Russ talked about ego lookalikes versus real spirit in action, i.e. the things that look enlightened but aren't quite there yet. Know what I'm talking about? So he talked about kindness that's only skin deep. Maybe that's kindness only when it's convenient. He also mentioned peaceful groundedness that lasts until an upsetting phone call. Consider that for a moment. Ever had one of those? And then there are a lot of spiritual practices that can get used as a form of escape. Ouch. There is also spiritual resilience, which is great until somebody doesn't do what we want them to do. And then I found, I'm going to do a little share screen here. I found this meme that that just it really brought it all home. It's like, oh, there's humanness in all of us, isn't there? So we'll go ahead and come back now. So I remember a movie once where one of the characters in the movie, very kind of hippie-like couple, and the female character just gets really upset and flies into this rage about something, and at the end goes, "Namaste." It's like, just the disconnect, the lack of ownership can be something really incredible to deal with. So I hope I'm not the only one in the room this morning that has an ego that really enjoys being spiritual and can't always handle everything that spirit's dishing out all the time. Do you know what I mean? You might have had that experience. Anyway, recently I have been reminded of just how much patience and compassion is required to work through the stuff that we get confronted with at the ego level. Immense amounts of patience and compassion. So Russ offered that what's really needed to transcend this stuff is a sense of being, which is harder than it looks and sounds. So we talk a lot about being human beings versus human doings, but frankly, in my experience, it takes a lot of focus to get daily reminders and to build strength around being. We live in a culture that begs for examples of being. We have lots of examples of doing, right? But we need more reinforcement and examples around being. And the idea here is that at some level, we all long for simplicity of being. And that much of what we experience emotionally takes us away from that. So here's the way that Russ characterized that. I found this really impactful. He said that when love encounters the world as it is, sadness is a normal response. When love encounters the world as it is, sadness is a normal response. There's a tendency to want to give up and withdraw. And if we do that, life escapes us. Have you ever heard or seen or experienced that? It's an emotional response to a world that often feels like too much. You know what I mean, right? I mean, I think we've probably all been there. So how do we stay engaged with life, with whatever is showing up, whatever guest is arriving, and how at the same time do we practice simplicity of being? I think that's a noble question, and that's what I wanted to delve into today with this. Now, my first response to that question is that the practice of simplicity of being, to do that, we have to stop making everything so complicated. Now, in our world, technology is complicated. Politics are complicated. Relationships are complicated. Even food is complicated. How many things would you look at in your life and say, it's complicated? So how to unwind some of that? Well, notice first that complicated is a habit of the mind that tends to keep us at the superficial level. It turns us into human pretzels, not just human doings, but it turns us into human pretzels. Simplicity of being is a deeper calling that requires us to transcend some of our fixation with form and drop into deeper awareness. So not being able to do my normal stuff on the outside for a bit might force me to look at stuff I've made more complicated than necessary on the inside. Message begrudgingly received. Now you know what I've been doing for the last month. So coming back into being present means that we have to come out of our trances. We have to come back into the body. And that may not always be pleasant. Now, by trances, I mean anything that takes our awareness out of the present. There are a lot of fixations that take us outside ourselves. Just go get on Facebook or, start doing internet searches or things and watch how fast your attention leaves. Sometimes even spiritual practices are used as a form of escape, right? Now, that might be helpful at certain times to gain perspective, but if done habitually as avoidance, it's just another distraction. So, what if we use meditation not as a way to get out of our bodies and out of ourselves, but as a way to get into ourselves and work on whatever messy content is there inside? You know about the messy content stuff? Um, I'm sure you get the distinction. I once heard Deepak Chopra years ago when Unity brought him to Central Coast. He talked about addiction being just a cheap substitute for the divine. You know, we all want that deeper connection, that deeper sense of presence. The point is not to try to find some escapist way around the stuff of life, but to muster what it takes to go through the stuff of life and get the most out of it. And that is definitely easier said than done. So God can only work with us when we are here. We have to show up. So there's another key takeaway. So I'm going to repeat that one for you. God can only work with us when we are here. We have to show up. So showing up means being present with whatever is going on. You and me showing up matters. It contributes to the peaceful present outcome that we all want. There's an opportunity to be present and peaceful amid all of that messiness. Now, does that feel like paradox or what? So, how can we feel sadness and compassion for the suffering of all sentient beings and still know at some level that it's perfect? One of the difficult aspects of spiritual awareness, in my experience, is the paradox of remembering spiritual perfection at one level and then trying not to resent the world for showing up as messed up as it is. Been there? I think I'm not alone. So feel that one with me. On one hand, immense compassion for suffering. And on the other hand, this world is so messed up. Now that translates for me into compassion for self-inflicted suffering, which is much of the suffering that we all end up experiencing, including my own. So if we can get beyond the suffering, hold that paradox, and connect to simplicity of being, there's a natural flow of creativity that opens up. And that often defines all norms and all things in our history. So the question is, are we willing to open into that level of creativity? That's where we get beyond smallness. That's where adventure starts and authenticity shows up in a big way. So there's this natural draw to simplicity of being for us at a soul level. We just have to drop down out of the complicated mind long enough to get back into beingness and experience it. So we take on practices that help us to connect being in the body with the heart and the mind again in a balanced way. It's not an either or, it's an all three and. We balance the body and the mind and the heart. We practice letting go of our identifications, the ideas that we have about ourselves, and we work at dropping into true beingness. Now, the waves of visitors will still come. That's just going to happen, as Rumi described for us. And in that sense of beingness, we get to greet them in a good way, in an attempt to see what kind of gift they bring instead of trying to slam the door on it. Now, nobody said that that's an easy process, but it is part of our human process. So thank you for your kind attention today. Thank you. Bless you. Namaste.